Okay, welcome back. We are Toothless and I are here at in our history book, chapter 14, section 1, beginning on page 418. This is a new chapter. The chapter title is The Age of Reform, 1820 to 1860. Section 1 begins on page 418, titled Social Reform. American Diary, quote, "The noise was like the roar of Niagara Falls. The vast sea of human beings seemed to be agitated as if by a storm. Some of the people were singing, others praying, some crying for mercy. While witnessing these scenes, a particularly strange sensation, such as I had never felt before, came over me. My heart beat tumultuously, or violently. My knees trembled, my lip quivered, and I felt as though I must fall to the ground." From Autobiography of Reverend James B. Finley. Page 419. Religion and Reform. Main idea. The Second Great Awakening influenced social and educational reforms. History and you. Do you volunteer to help people, such as the elderly, with their daily chores? You are probably familiar with individuals or organizations who help people in need. Read about how reformers felt a responsibility to help others. Religious camp meetings called revivals were quite common in the early 1800s. People would travel great distances to hear preachers speak and to pray, sing, weep, and shout. This was the time when a wave of religious fervor known as the Second Great Awakening stirred the nation. The First Great Awakening had spread through the colonies in the mid-1700s. There was a new spirit of reform throughout America in the early 1800s. This spirit brought changes to American religion, education, and literature. Some reformers sought to by forming utopias. These communities were based on a vision of the perfect society. However, most were founded on impractical ideas, and only a few groups, like the Mormons, were able to establish stable, lasting communities. The religious influence. Attending revivals often made men and women eager to reform both their own lives and the world. Some people became involved in missionary work and social reform movements. Among those movements was the push to ban alcohol. Lyman Beecher, a Connecticut minister, crusaded against the use of alcohol. He wanted to protect society from rum-selling, tippling folk, infidels or non-believers, and rough scruff. Beecher and other reformers called for temperance, or drinking little or no alcohol. They used lectures, pamphlets, and revival-style rallies to warn people of the dangers of liquor. The temperance movement led to some victories when Maine and other states passed laws banning the manufacture and sale of alcoholic beverages. Most of these laws, however, were later repealed and canceled. Page 420. Reforming education. Reformers also wanted to improve education. In the mid-1850s, most schools were poorly funded, and many teachers lacked training. Some people opposed compulsory or required education. In addition, restrictions were placed on who could attend school. Girls were often excluded because parents thought education was wasted on future wives and mothers. Many African Americans were also denied the right to attend school. Massachusetts lawyer Horace Mann was a leader of educational reform, partly because of his efforts. In 1839, Massachusetts founded the nation's first state-supported normal school, where high school graduates were trained to become teachers. Other states soon adopted Mann's reforms. Many new colleges and universities were created during the Age of Reform. Most admitted only men, but gradually higher education became available to groups that had been denied the opportunity. Oberlin College of Ohio, for example, founded in 1833, admitted both women and African Americans. People with special needs. Some reformers focused on the problems of teaching people with disabilities. Thomas Gauldalais developed a method to educate people who were hearing impaired. He opened the Hartford School for the Deaf in Connecticut in 1817. At about the same time, Samuel Gridley Howe advanced the cause of people who were visually impaired. He developed books with large raised letters that people with sight impairments could read with their fingers. Howe headed the Perkins Institute, a school for the blind in Boston. School teacher Dorothea Dix began visiting prisons in 1841. She found some prisoners chained to the walls with little or no clothing, often in unheated cells. Dix also learned that some of the inmates were guilty of no crime. They were people who were mentally ill. Dix made it her life's work to educate the public about the poor conditions for prisoners and the mentally ill. Reading check. Identifying. How did Samuel Howe help the visually impaired? Page 421, Cultural Trends. Main idea. A distinct type of American literature emerged in the 1820s. History in You. Have you read works by Thoreau, Emerson, or Dickinson? Read to learn how these writers changed American literature. The changes in American society also influenced art and literature. Beginning in the 1820s, American artists developed their own style and explored American themes. The American spirit of reform influenced the Transcendentalists. These thinkers and writers stressed the relationship between humans and nature and the importance of the individual conscience. Margaret Fuller, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Henry David Thoreau were leading Transcendentalists. Through her writings, Fuller supported women's rights. In his works, Emerson urged people to listen to the inner voice of conscience and to overcome prejudice. Thoreau practiced civil disobedience by refusing to obey laws he considered unjust. In 1846, Thoreau went to jail rather than pay a tax to support the Mexican War. Numerous poets also created great works during this period. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote narrative or story poems such as The Song of Hiawatha. Poet Walt Whitman captured the new American spirit and confidence in The Leaves of Grass. Emily Dickinson wrote simple, deeply personal poems. In a poem called Hope, written in 1861, she compares hope to a bird. Primary source. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. From Emily Dickinson, Selected Poems. During this time, women were the authors of the most popular fiction. Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote the most successful bestseller of the mid-1800s, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Stowe's novel explored the injustice of slavery, an issue that took on new urgency during the Age of Reform. Reading check. Identifying cause and effect. How did the spirit of reform influence American authors? Section 1 Review. Vocabulary. Please define the following terms. Revival. Utopia. Temperance. Lecture. Normal school. Transcendentalist. Civil disobedience. Author. Number 2, identifying. What problems spurred reform in the area of education? Number 3, explaining. What themes did the Transcendentalists focus on in their writings? Okay, that's it. That's chapter 14, section 1. Coakley and Toothless out.